Alright everybody, it has been a little while since I sat down and recorded an episode, but here we are. I've been busy doing some personal stuff. I started a business, it's been getting warmer, and I just haven't had the time to actually sit down and record anything. But today I wanted to go through a tweet thread that I found from this user called Salazzo. Anyways, this guy, I give him all the credit. I'm not taking responsibility for writing this thing. I just thought it was an interesting thread to read, and I thought I'd share it. So today's topic is going to be on fat, and I have another video coming out about cholesterol from a different tweet thread I found. So these next two videos will be kind of nutrition based. So if you're not into that, sorry. That's just what I came up with. Let's get into it. In 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower suffered a massive heart attack while playing golf. What happened next brought on the biggest obesity epidemic the world has ever seen. While playing golf in Colorado, President Eisenhower felt like he was experiencing strong indigestion. Throughout the day, his indigestion continued to worsen, and his family worried that something was seriously wrong. He was rushed to the hospital for a diagnosis. At Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center, his indigestion was declared a heart attack. The president was out of the Oval Office for a total of 10 days, and the stock market plummeted and lost $14 billion in value. This was the single worst day for markets since the start of World War II. Heart attacks were becoming increasingly common amongst middle-aged American men, and nobody could figure out why. The nation was in shock, and the public was desperate for answers. It's important to note that in the 1950s and 1960s, cigarette consumption was at the highest it's ever been. Eisenhower himself was smoking upwards of 4 packs of cigarettes per day at the time. Ancel Keys, a University of Minnesota pathologist, vehemently insisted that he had the answer. He believed that there was a strong correlation between the consumption of saturated animal fat and the increased occurrences of heart attacks at the time. Keys believed that saturated fat increased LDL cholesterol, otherwise known as the bad cholesterol. When bad cholesterol levels got too high, the arteries became encased in plaque, which resulted in heart attacks. This famously became known as Keyes' diet heart hypothesis. Meanwhile, we have been eating butter and saturated fat for thousands of years. Keyes started blaming ancient foods for what modern lifestyle choices were causing: cigarette smoking and alcohol consumption. To support this, Keyes organized a study of saturated fat consumption amongst various countries around the world to prove if there was a correlation to heart disease. Keyes strategically chose 6 countries to study: US, Canada, Australia, England, and Wales, Italy, and Japan. When you look at the graph, it looks like there is an exact linear correlation between saturated fat and heart disease. But what if I told you there weren't just 6 countries, but 22 instead? Keyes cherry-picked 6 countries that would show a perfect correlation between saturated fat consumption and heart disease-related deaths. When you plug in the remaining 15 countries, there's no correlation at all. Keyes knew it was a hypothesis and cherry-picked his data. The public did not know this, however, because the 6 countries shown on the graph were the only published countries released during the study. Keyes recommended that a diet low in saturated fat was what Americans should be following. Eisenhower himself started implementing Keyes' recommendations for a low-fat diet, and cholesterol became the boogeyman overnight. Even though it has been proven that raising LDL cholesterol from diet does not translate to heart attacks and death. It's also important to note that Keyes had a fiery personality and was willing to argue with anyone, anytime, anywhere. He was able to maneuver his way onto the board of the American Heart Association. In 1961, the AHA came out with the first advice ever to cut back on saturated fat to prevent heart attacks. Up until this point, Americans consumed almost 50% of their calories from fat and were relatively slim. The sugar industry also did not want to be blamed for heart disease and metabolic dysfunction. In 1965, the sugar industry paid off Harvard researchers to produce 2 articles to exonerate sugar and blame saturated fat for cardiovascular disease. To seal the deal, in 1977, a select Senate committee recommended the low-fat diet to the nation. against scientists' pleas. The argument was, quote, "We cannot afford to wait for evidence on saturated fat." The senators were literally warned by scientists and they ignored it. By 1980, the first U.S. dietary guidelines were released, and the campaign against fat officially began. They recommended 7 to 11 servings of bread every day and 50 to 55% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, mostly grains. Saturated fat consumption was decimated to 10%. So what did we do when we took the fat out of our food? We supplemented with sugar and vegetable oils that were fat-free. Marketing companies spent millions convincing consumers that sugar and vegetable oils were low-fat and therefore healthier than fat. And this is something that Adam Carolla has ranted about for a long time. The problem with fat is that it has the word fat in it, and no one wants to be fat, and so why would you eat fat? It says fat right in the name, even though it's all kind of counterintuitive. Food companies also paid hundreds of thousands to pay for the American Heart Association's Heart Healthy Checkoff designation. Even the AHA was able to cash in on this money-making operation. Americans obediently listened and cut back on red meat, whole milk, eggs, and butter. The result, some of the highest obesity rates the world has ever seen. Currently in America, 70% of adults are overweight or obese. 10% of all people, that's 34 million, are diabetic. 96 million adults, that's 1 in 3, are pre-diabetic. 7 out of 10 modern deaths are chronic diseases, largely preventable by diet and lifestyle changes. Americans consume over 130 pounds of sugar per year and over 1,095 tablespoons, or 4 gallons, of inflammatory vegetable oils every single year. We know that chronic inflammation caused by refined sugars, grains, and vegetable oil is far more dangerous than saturated fat ever could be. I share this long thread with you to unravel the history of our current dietary guidelines that were built off an unfounded hypothesis. Our system has failed you, and it's our responsibility to turn our current dietary guidelines upside down so you can thrive. You are responsible for being the CEO of your own health. Experiment with real food as your medicine. Find medical practitioners that want to help you be metabolically healthy and not just treat disease. Lastly, thank you to username Big Fat Surprise and her amazing book, The Big Fat Surprise, that served as my inspiration for writing this thread. This book is simply fantastic, and Nina is a wealth of insight and information into our current U.S. dietary system. Anyways, that's going to conclude this video. If you like this video and type of content I'm making, consider giving this video a like and maybe subscribing. I'll see you all in the next video, and that one will be about cholesterol. Peace.